Now, way back in 2006, I came out with my second DVD, which was called Warhead. And although that focused on psychological aspects of combat, the basic precept, the basic notion of that download was that we have tools, we have weapons, if you will, that are like warheads. But their effectiveness completely depends on our ability to deliver them. So if I have a really good hook punch, but I can never get myself into position or have the correct speed and timing to actually hit a target, then the best hook punch in the world won't really matter. And so in the exact same way, everything that we have in our toolbox is limited by and dependent on our delivery system. And if we want to look at vital point striking and understand what truly separates pragmatic, real-world, effective, reliable vital points for targets from woo-woo mystical bunk, the simple answer is the delivery system. Are we training ourselves to affect these points, to hit these points in a way that is reliably reproducible under conditions of stress? When I am moving, when they are moving, when I am being hit, and when I am throwing multiple punches and bunches. You will oftentimes hear these nuggets of wisdom in the martial arts. A clavicle breaks under just 10 pounds of pressure. You can dislocate a knee with 7 pounds of pressure. The human nose breaks with 6 pounds of pressure. The small bones in the hands can be broken with 2.5 pounds of pressure. All right. Now, there are nuggets of truth to this. In an ideal world, under laboratory settings, yes, arguably you could break a clavicle under 10 pounds of pressure. But when you consider, for example, that an average professional rugby player will tackle with about half a ton of pressure, although shoulder injuries are prevalent in rugby and they do occur, certainly not every single player is fracturing a clavicle on every single impact. So why is that? If I took this 18-pound kettlebell and my clavicle breaks under 10 pounds of pressure, if I put the full weight of this kettlebell on my clavicle, it doesn't break. And why doesn't it break? It's under the weight. Well, the simple reason is that it's the way the force is being applied. If I drop this from height, or worse still, dropped it from height landing handle first with a much smaller surface area, the likelihood of my clavicle breaking would massively increase. But it still wouldn't be guaranteed, because when the kettlebell hits, I will be moving, it will be moving, the impact is rarely going to be perfectly clean, and the reality is I may be injured, but I may not be stopped or broken. Pressure points should be looked at in the exact same way. Coming up and brushing somebody's mental nerve on the chin or lightly affecting the temple looks really cool in a demo. But ultimately, what is the effectiveness if I'm almost never going to be in a position where I can do it that precisely and that calmly, and I'm almost never going to have somebody volunteering to have it done? Another way to look at it is to look at research on the strength of the human body. If you take something like the spinal erector muscles, technically they're too small to actually do what they do. How do they hold our body up? How do they enable our legs to move? How do they allow us to carry extra weight when the muscles are as small as they are? Well, one of the first researchers to show that it's not up to the muscle alone was Bartolink in 1957. And he said that a huge component of our thoracic strength in general wasn't actually the spinal erector muscles, but it was actually interthoracic pressure bolstered by and supported by breath. Then when we go back to the mid-70s, Sergei Grakovetsky, the famous author of The Spinal Engine, he famously showed that technically each vertebrae in our spine and the muscles around it should snap and crack under the pressure of something as simple as holding out a 2-meter-long fishing rod with a few pounds of fish on the end of it. With all that leverage and all that power, it should be in a laboratory physiologically impossible for our spine not to crumble. And yet it doesn't. And the reason for that wasn't just the thoracic pressure Bartolink spoke about with breath, but it was also the role of fascia. Moreover, it was the constant undulation and fluctuation that were occurring in all of our connective tissues and all of our surface tissues that were always calibrating a swaying body and, in essence, deferring pressure. And it's That's precisely the way that our body ends up being as strong as it is, because we are much more than just the sum of our parts. And that's important to realize, because something like an eye in a laboratory could be squeezed and popped with probably a little bit more pressure than you might need to pop a hard grape. But just putting your thumb into somebody's eye and popping it is very, very difficult under real conditions.
Pop the eye out, okay? And give him an opportunity to take a nice long look at himself.
First of all, because it's a living human being and you're triggering one of the most primal flinch responses they have, and they're going to close that eye and move it and tuck and move all over the place. Secondly, a lubricated eye is smushing all over, and the thumb is likely to cause damage and to cause profound injury, but the likelihood that you're going to get a clean shot that's just going to rupture that eye is much, much lower than people oftentimes promote. Injure the eye, affect the senses, delay the person? Absolutely. Pop it out of their socket or squish it effortlessly? Not so much. So all of our pressure points in our body need to be looked at in this way. First of all, they are part of a dynamic organism that is fighting to stay alive, that is going to move and shift and adjust unpredictably. Secondly, how we deliver the force is going to be essential. We're never really going to have many opportunities to just come up and lightly touch it. We need to always be looking at our delivery systems. How do we get to our go-to? How do we put ourselves in the best possible position to hit these various targets? So we're going to be looking at much more stab in the heart, gross motor, simple guerrilla-like tactics. And we're going to try to caution ourselves away from these very alluring and very impressive little one-touch demos where we're lightly affecting people. Those are cool for party tricks, but they won't even really work for a very compliant human. And there's nothing wrong with learning party tricks, guys, and there is an importance to have skills that will work on a compliant human, because sometimes you might need it, and then you might need some lighter techniques for the drunk uncle or the very, very drunk friend that needs a little bit of motivation, and so on and so forth, going all the way up to a life and death fight. But if it's a life and death fight, somebody attacking me with a weapon, there is no chance in hell that I'm doing a light touch. I'm going for power. I'm looking to cause massive damage with very, very reliable points, very, very reliable tools, but most of all, very, very reliable delivery systems.